that you can see me well. Hope you can see me. My name is Askar Japarkulov, Director of the Department of Macroeconomic Policy of EEC. And I am a moderator and the speaker today. First of all, I want to thank our speakers that are able to join us today during the pandemic. And I would like to thank the United Nations Economic Commission for providing a platform and opportunity to discuss issues of economic development and international relations. The topic of the session can be said on the topic of the day. It is the consequences of the pandemic for the EAEU countries and the prospects for their sustainable development in the new conditions and the prospects. In expert circles, there are many opinions and assessments about this issue, but there is no one point of view about the current situation. There is no single opinion about the recipe. Therefore, we have invited experts from different fields and countries. And let me the EAEU, Irina Alexandrovna Zbarskaya, Head of the Department of Social and Demographic Statistics of the State Statistical Committee of the CIS. Velichko Irina Alexandrovna, Head of the Main Department of Multilateral Diplomacy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Belarus. Svetov Anton Petrovich, Deputy Director of the Department of Multilateral Economic Cooperation and Special Projects of the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. Velika Natalie Mikhailovna, Deputy Director for Scientific and Research Work of the Institute of Social and Political Studies of the Federal Research Sociological Center of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Ryazantsev Sergei Vasilyevich, Director of the Institute for Demographic Research of the Federal Research Sociological Center of the Russian Academy of Sciences. And Vasilyev Sergei Yurievich, Senior Advisor to the Permanent Mission of the Russian Federation to the UN Office and other international organizations in Geneva. Dear speakers, please respect the time limit for your speeches, 7-10 minutes. And let me inform you that we have simultaneous translation from Russian into English and vice versa. Please speak with pauses so that the interpreters could have time to translate for our audience. In addition, the Commission's YouTube channel hosts a live broadcast of the session. And how many people? Over 100 participants. So the audience is quite big. And I'm very glad to see huge interest in our event. And the last thing, please, during the speech of other presentations, turn off your microphones to avoid background noise. And I would ask Goara Shotovna Barsegyan, Director of the EC Integration Development Department, to open the discussion. The floor is yours, Goara Shotovna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Japarkulov. Good afternoon, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to welcome you at today's event, and I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to briefly introduce you the Eurasian Economic Union's experience and progress made in achieving in SDGs. Although the 2030 agenda and the related SDGs are primarily focused on setting guidelines and development priorities for individual states, the achievement of this agenda requires more than the sum of national actions. It calls for collective efforts at the regional level to tackle regional and global issues. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the Eurasian Economic Union was the first regional economic integration to analyze the achievement of the SDGs within a particular region, and the first one to present such a report to the UN during the high-level political forum on sustainable development in 2017. The results of this report clearly demonstrated that regional integration gives an additional impetus, positively affecting the achievement of the SDG indicators by the member states of the association. Moreover, in areas where economic integration has reached a deeper phase, there is more rapid progress towards the SDGs. Today, the sustainable development issues get a lot of attention from the Commission. The topic is being widely researched and developed in terms of both statistics and methodology. The monitoring of the national SDG coordinators is being carried out on a systemic basis, and we are continuously working to increase the number of the indicators which can be calculated within the framework of an integration association. In addition to the adopted ones, we are also trying to monitor the indicators for the national states. In 2019, the Commission ordered a research project focusing on the development of an analysis methodology for monitoring the SDG achievements in the Eurasian Economic Union. Based on the research results and experience analysis of other regional integration associations, the Commission prepared a draft report on progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals in the Eurasian Economic Union region in 2020. It is worth mentioning that since the UN doesn't develop any methodological approaches to assess the assessment of the SDGs at the level of country associations, the proposed methodology in the report is fundamentally new and simultaneously focuses on both statistical indicators and adopted supranational measures and activities. The Eurasian Economic Union keeps a close eye on the progress towards the SDGs in the region. The analysis of a number of fundamental documents which constitute the EAEU law revealed that the goals, objectives, and principles of the Union in total cover with a varying degree all SDGs, as well as 108 targets out of 169. The Eurasian Economic Commission is now actively implementing the strategy for the development of the Eurasian economic integration until 2025. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that most of measures and mechanisms included in the strategy will bring the member states closer to implementing the 2030 SDG agenda. In addition to the traditional issues of further development of trade and economic integration related primarily to SDGs 7, 8, and 9, the strategy pays special attention to social development issues closely connected with the SDGs 1, 2, 3, 4, and 10. Namely, one of the integration priorities established by the strategy is the involvement of new areas in the integration agenda, which provides for the expansion of cooperation in the field of education, science, healthcare, tourism, and sports in order to ensure the availability of modern achievements in these areas for the citizens of the Eurasian Economic Union member states. Furthermore, the strategy provides for instruments to ensure the most effective institutional system of the Union, which will directly complement the achievement of the SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and pave a way for further development of regulation to achieve SDG 1, eradicative poverty, SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 3, good health and well-being, SDG 4, quality education, and SDG 10, reduce inequalities. And finally, the strategic measures identified for transforming the EAEU into one of the most significant development centers of the modern world will facilitate the intensification of cooperation with regional and international organizations in the field of SDGs, among other things. The subject matter of sustainable development goals has a great potential to become one of the key topics for cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Union and other regional integration associations and international organizations. Sharing best practices and experience exchange will definitely be beneficial for all sides, given the fact that different organizational structures use and develop different approaches to implementation of SDGs. The cooperation can take a form of joint events within the framework of ministerial conferences under the auspices of ECOSOS. Such a dialogue, I'm sure, will contribute on the one hand to the development of the regional dimension and on the other hand to the achievement of SDGs at the global level. And in future, the Eurasian Economic Commission can also act as a driver for the development of SDGs in the EAEU region, not only facilitating the coordination of member states' approaches to monitor the SDGs achievements, but also to integrate the SDG philosophy into all EAEU supranational legislation. Dear colleagues, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Goara Shotana, for your presentation. And as for questions, well, we will see questions in the comments of YouTube channel, and we are going to present these questions at the end of all presentations. And now I would like to become a speaker myself. Goara Shotana, could you turn off your presentation, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to be a speaker and speak on the topic regional economic integration as a factor in reducing the consequences of the pandemic and transition to sustainable growth, using the example of the EAEU. The pandemic has become a test for healthcare systems in many countries of the world and a serious shock for the global economy. The current global economic crisis caused by it already exceeds in scale not only the financial crisis of 2008-9, but according to some estimates, is the deepest since World War II. A sharp decline in business activity, temporary closure of production facilities, instability of financial and commodity markets, self-isolation of the population raise the question of achieving in the field of international cooperation, which accordingly has negative impact on the achievements of SDGs. Globalization has made the world economy highly interdependent. The destruction of global value chains is socially sensitive sectors. The production of food, medicine, energy, etc., is especially dangerous. For example, agricultural sector, the lack of timely delivery of seeds, breeding kernels in animal husbandry, plant protection products and veterinary drugs, shortage of workers when planting or harvesting crops may cause a global food crisis, which is given the alarm by the specialized agencies of the UN, Food Organization and the International Labour Organization. Impact of the COVID pandemic has affected almost all countries of the world and has made serious adjustments to economic development, including the countries of EEC. At the same time, the economic effects from the impact of the pandemic manifested itself in each of the EAEU countries in different ways. In Armenia, the recession is especially disastrous due to the high role of tourism in the structure of the economy. In Belarus, due to the absence of national restrictive measures, the impact of the pandemic on the economy was minimal, but at the same time, there was a decrease in external demand for local products. In Kyrgyzstan, the largest decline occurred in textile production. As for Russia and Kazakhstan, the main blow fell on the spheres directly related to contact between people, services in the field of tourism, food, leisure, and transport services. Well, and in general, if in the first quarter of 2020, the countries of the Union have not yet fully felt the negative effect or impact of the spread of the pandemic, then in the second quarter, the services sector and retail trade have already felt this effect to the greatest extent. For example, the passenger turnover at the end of the year in the EAEU as a whole decreased by 51%, cargo turnover by 6.1%. The volume of foreign trade with third countries in 2020 compared to 2019 decreased by almost 15%. Mutual trade fell to 11%. At the same time, against the background of the general negative dynamics, certain sectors showed growth. Agricultural production increased from 1.1 to 5.6%. The processing industries demonstrated growth of 0.4%. The production of basic pharmaceutical products and drugs by 23.1%. Foodstuff, beverages, tobacco, 3% growth. And there was a positive trend in construction. The volume of completed construction increased by 0.7. According to the Commission's assessment, in 2020, a decrease in GDP occurred in all EAEU member states. In Armenia, a decrease by 7.6%, in Belarus by 0.9%, Kazakhstan by 2.6%, Kyrgyzstan 8.6%, and Russia 3.1%. In the context of the pandemic crisis, the member states have taken large-scale measures to support the population, businesses, and strategic enterprises. The main measures for business concerned the reduction of the tax burden, introduction of deferrals for credit and tax payments, provision of concessional financing. And along with this, interaction between the member states was strengthened. A number of joint, including temporary anti-crisis and stabilization measures were adopted. In April last year, a joint statement by the members of the Supreme Eurasian Economic Council was adopted in connection with the pandemic. Heads of states confirmed their readiness to continue their synergism to deracinate the negative consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, ensure social macroeconomic stability in our countries, and maintain business and investment activity. Governments, central national banks of the Union member states, and the EEC have been instructed to carry out coordinated measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19, maintain the stability of the functioning of internal markets, including food markets, support citizens of the EAEU states and businesses to overcome the negative consequences of the pandemic. In April last year, the Eurasian Intergovernmental Council adopted the most important joint document on measures taken within the frames of the EU to ensure economic stability in the context of the pandemic. Among the specific measures implemented by the Commission together with the member states, I will note the following. In accordance with the decision of the union bodies, in the first half of 2020, there was a ban on the export of certain types of food products from the union countries. We launched a mobile application for unhindered movement of tourists across the EU. Deployment of a network of experimental laboratories for passing a coronavirus test and receive a QR code. And now it is working for 3 countries. And very soon other member states will join it. A third point I think is very important. It's about joint measures to create vaccines. We have launched the production of Sputnik 5, and we also transfer the rights to production for other countries like Kazakhstan and Belarus and Armenia and Kyrgyzstan are preparing platforms for local production. On the whole, national and joint measures taken by the EAEU made it possible to mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic. It should be said that the decline in GDP in the Union was about 3%, while the decline in GDP in the Eurozone was 6.8%, which indicates that the decline in the EAEU countries was less significant compared to other developed countries in the world. And today we are taking the longer view in the light of the new economic reality. The implementation of the SDGs is relevant not only at the global and national levels, but also at the level of regional integration associations. The Commission, as a supranational regulatory body, seeks to advance the UN SDGs, unlocking the potential of integration for people, improving their well-being and quality of life have become one of the main goals of the Commission. To promote the achieved high-level interaction, in December 2020, the heads of the EAEU member states signed an important decision on strategic directions for the development of Eurasian economic integration until 2025. The strategic directions are aligned with the goals of sustainable and inclusive economic development of each member state. They provide for the creation of conditions for a faster and advanced development of economies, an increase in investment and innovation activity, increase in employment and the provision of decent work for all. Special attention is paid to sustainable development goals, within which flexible mechanisms for target assistance to economic development will be developed. Let me draw you some examples of these activities. Identification of principles and criteria for supporting the development of the economies of the member states to ensure inclusive economic development, including mechanisms for converging the levels of their economic development, creating preconditions for the convergence of the member states in terms of level of economic development and income of the population, development of general principles and approaches to ensure food security based on the principles and approaches of the methodology of the Food and Agriculture Organizations of the UN. I will also note other areas related to the achievements of the UN SDGs. Increase in energy saving and energy efficiency, solution of existing environmental problems, sustainable development. In this area, it is planned to combine efforts to create and use new technologies, innovations, including green technologies, renewables, circular economy models, bioengineering, and nanotechnology. And as a whole, the implementation of strategic directions will not only contribute to the progressive development of the EEC, but also the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In conclusion, I would like to express my sincere hope that due to joint efforts, we'll be able to quickly get out of the current global pandemic crisis, and hope that our next meeting will be possible offline on the shores of the Geneva Lake. Dear colleagues, thank you for listening. And I would like to give floor to Irina Alexandrovna Sbarskaya. Irina Alexandrovna, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Before I start, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to join this session and to speak. So I'm waiting for my presentation to appear on the screen, and I will start. Yeah, thanks a lot. First of all, I would like to make several general remarks about sustainable developments. I represent a statistical agency, and I will focus on statistics. So the resolution of the UN on the agenda of sustainable development until 2030 was, of course, a challenge for national statistical systems and an impetus for further development when we overcame the first shock. Figures that were included in the global list of parameters of SDGs, we realized that statistical systems are to be very quick to react and respond to innovations that were proposed in terms of a number of parameters within this monitoring system. And today, after almost 5 years, on the whole, national statistical systems of the CIS countries have passed this test, and the major problem facing all national statistical agencies is a disaggregation of data. It's a serious question related to reform of methodology and system of collecting and processing of data. And the statistical committee started its activity in terms of monitoring the values from the activity that together with other member states of the CIS, we prepared the list from the global list with 110 indicators, and most of the member states said that there is a methodology and we get the information. So the principle was representation for the majority of member states. And then we have been publishing a statistical collection of articles for 4 years, and there are some other publications. We have a web page on our website of our statistical committee, and if we look at the progress dynamics and this information massive that is available regarding the SDGs indicators. The first collection had 19 indicators from the global list and 25 indicators as additional or proxy indicators. And now the number of indicators from the global list has doubled, 33 indicators all in all now in our collection of articles. And besides, we also include some local parameters of this or that country, the achievements for the sake of sustainable development. Of course, I cannot but mention the situation with the population census. For all countries of the CIS countries, population census have always been and will remain the main source of information about the population. And having analyzed national programs, 35 indicators of the global list can be obtained on the basis of the information of national censuses. The main benefit of these censuses is the opportunity to obtain data from all levels of disaggregation in terms of socioeconomic and ethical parameters. It's a unique information resource giving us an opportunity to make our monitoring more effective. You see the current situation. In 2019, there were 2 population censuses in Belarus and Azerbaijan. In 2020, only Tajikistan performed the census according to schedule. Kyrgyzstan, Russia, under the pandemic conditions, had to postpone for the next year. These censuses will take place in 2021, except Russia, because it's not clear yet when. And it should be said that this round may become the first in the last 30 years when all member states of the CIS will have population censuses. Well, unfortunately, looking at Uzbekistan, the latest Uzbekistan census was in 1989 when the Soviet Union still existed. And the corresponding decision of the government was made, and the next census will take place in 2023. And the Uzbek colleagues are preparing for this event. Next slide, you see the change of population by age group. You see the age structure country by country, which is varied, but on the whole, looking at the situation in the CIS, according to UN classification, our population is rather old, 65 plus, about 13%, and which demonstrates that on the whole, the population is quite old. And of course, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia are leaders in this context in terms of demographic structure, and it's different from country to country, and the trends still remain. It should be also remarked that the indicators out of the global list that by 2020 we had substantial progress in those indicators, as a decrease of child and maternal mortality. You see the indicators of SDGs that all CIS countries nowadays have managed to reduce their mortality rates. And I can say that Belarus, if you look at maternal mortality, the values are almost invisible on the chart. Some years showed zeros, which means that the system of healthcare is being developed and improved. 98-99% of births take place in medical institutions, which tells about serious approach of the governmental agencies. And the results are obvious regarding life expectancy. And in my opinion, it's well, integral value reflecting the level of life, living standards, and the quality of health service, and represents the dynamics in our countries. We see that all CIS countries have certain growth of lifespan. We managed to overcome crisis phenomenon of the 90s, and now we have positive dynamics. You see the data of the year 2019. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, looking at 2020, we saw new disease with a high mortality rate, and according to World Health Organization, as of March the 1st this year, the CIS countries have COVID-19, and the number of deaths was 0.1 million people. And we prepared the analysis of overall mortality rate. We have not received data from Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Belarus. And on the basis of this preliminary data, the mortality rate in the CIS is 11.6 deaths per 1,000 people, compared to the average value calculated for the previous 4-year period. The increase in the mortality rate for all causes amounted to almost 15%. Of course, we are to wait final data and understand the reasons for deaths. and the contribution of COVID to this death. Of course, the indicators of life expectancy of 2020 may have a negative impact on the positive trend of the previous years. But I repeat, these data are preliminary, not final. And here you can see very illustrative characteristics in terms of GDP per capita, a sharp decrease of retail trade turnover and transportation of passengers, which has already been mentioned by the previous speakers during the lockdown periods, which had a negative impact on economic indicators. Unemployment rate of the previous year on the whole in the CIS market grew by 1%. At the beginning of the year, the dynamic was quite good. We saw the reduction of unemployment among younger generation, very special target group within the frames of monitoring SDGs. But unfortunately, the whole year 2020 demonstrated growth of unemployment because and enterprises and people were made redundant and they had difficult living conditions. Living standards of the population, if you look at the table, the dynamics of changes of the share of population living below the poverty line. Here you can see national criteria of this poverty line, and we can see positive dynamics until 2019 and 2020. The reduction of the share of poor population, this is a positive factor, of course. So far, we have not obtained data of 2020. We received data of the 3 quarters of 2020. What can be said from Kazakhstan and Russia? Well, the measures of support to the population will help to maintain and this living standard. And of course, we expect the final data which will help us to have a comprehensive picture of the situation in our countries. And as a conclusion, I want to say a few words about Statistical Committee reaction to this COVID situation and the way we organized our work. Well, we were very quick to react and organized interaction with national statistical agencies of the CIS countries to monitor the situation and provide advice. And from April 2020, we received queries and requests from national statistical agencies regarding the registration of special separate cases when people were made redundant with uncertain perspectives of further employment in the future, and we cooperated with the Department of Statistics of International Organization of Labor, and they prepared recommendations regarding these issues, and our task was in translating these recommendations into Russian, and to help our colleagues providing with consulting and adequate information. And currently we are working in this area. We help with the translation of almost all international recommendations and analytical materials in connection with COVID and the pandemics. Our website has a special section about COVID-19, and everyone may visit it and read the materials that have been translated and provided to our colleagues in other statistical agencies. And we have also connections and links with our counterparts in other CIS countries. And after receiving the data of the 2020 and analyzing the situation that touched all the spheres of life and affected our population. Thank you for listening. Irina Alexandrovna, thank you very much. This issue is very important regarding statistics, and sometimes figures vary. And thank you. And I already see questions addressed personally to you, but I will address these questions to you later, of course. And the next speaker is Irina Alexandrovna Velichko, head of the Department of Multilateral Diplomacy of Republic of Belarus, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The floor is yours, Irina.
Important event. Today, every participant raised this topic, and we all agreed, and we all do agree that during the pandemic of the coronavirus, international community faced an unprecedented crisis in terms of scale and consequences. The crisis should be viewed not only through the prism of problems, but also should be seen as a window of opportunity that have given impetus to develop some socio-economic and socio-political spheres. Belarus managed to fulfill its social obligations even during the peak of the coronavirus pandemic and demonstrated certain achievements on some of the CDGs, even though some criticism was taking place that Belarus did not implement a strict lockdown. Still, we see that those policies also had some positive impacts. According to estimates of international experts, the level of Belarus's progress in its achieving CDGs is 70%. In 2019, Belarus ranked 53rd in the Human Development Index, maintaining its place in the category of countries with a high level of human development. In the Sustainable Development Goals ranking, Belarus moved from 23rd to 18th position. Progress towards Sustainable Development Goals is determined on the basis of an assessment methodology of United Nations using target indicator values. Belarus also uses that methodology, and according to those indicators, I wanted to share some of our achievements, some of the numbers, what progress have been made in terms of following Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 1, no poverty. Extreme poverty has been completely eradicated in Belarus. The poverty rate in Belarus is half the average for CIS and Eastern Europe countries. Goal 5, gender equality. Belarus ranks 31st by gender inequality indicator. The country has gender parity in education. The share of women in leadership positions and in parliament is growing. However, there's still a gap, which is one of our key problems, which is a gap between women's and men's wages, which is about 27% today. Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. The population of the country has 100% access to electricity, and its consumption is fully supported by the production at our own power plants. Belarus seeks to maximize the use of renewable energy sources, which is today designated by the UN as a key factor in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. The idea of having the first MPP in the country, which is planned for 2022, when it will be commissioned, it should also help us to fully achieve goal number 7. CDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. The number of energy efficient apartment buildings in Belarus is increasing each year. The concept of smart cities is being implemented. There's a high level of access to public transport in the country. The work in construction, reconstruction, modernization of gas treatment plants is carried out, which contributes to the reduction of emissions of contaminants into the air. Measures are taken to reduce emissions of pollutants from transport. Electric mobility is being introduced. CDG 17, Partnership for Sustainable Development. Belarus has created an effective and developed architecture of a national coordinator for the implementation of CDGs. It includes partnership groups that are made up of representatives of civil society, businesses, and parliament. There's interaction with UN agencies and other international and regional partners. National strategies and programs are aligned with the CDGs, and effective interagency, intersectoral, and public ties are established for their implementation. Positive dynamics can be seen in the implementation of the following sustainable development goals. CDG number 2, no hunger. According to the 2019 Global Food Security Rating, the Republic of Belarus ranks 36th in the world and 20th in the European region. The quantitative criteria of food security in the Republic in 2020 were achieved, and national food security is fully assured. CDG number 3, good health and well-being. Belarus is one of the world's leaders in access to health services. Life expectancy is growing, although at a slow pace. Birth and maternal mortality rates have fallen significantly, and we're thankful. I'm thankful to the previous speaker, Irina, who provided statistics, and she made it very tangible. Of course, we will clarify the number, the mortality numbers from COVID. I don't know why you didn't get that data, but we will ask our relevant government bodies to provide that information to you, even though all of that information is open sources. But all the same, we promise to do that for you. As part of the National Preventive Immunization Calendar, the country ensures 100% vaccination of the population. We believe that the coronavirus pandemic will expand the list of preventive vaccinations. At present, 2 types of vaccines are used in Belarus against COVID, Russian and Chinese ones. The priority vaccination of target groups is carried out for healthcare and education employees. When it's completed, vaccination of the rest of the population will begin. In addition, by the end of March, we expect to start production of national vaccine against COVID-19 that is being developed on the basis of Sputnik V. SDG 4, quality education. For Belarus, education is one of the priorities of development, and consistent access to education is guaranteed at the state level, as evidenced by the high rating of the Education Level Index. Belarus has achieved high adult literacy rate. The rate is close to 100%. High coverage of preschool, primary, and secondary education, and the concept of lifelong learning is being implemented. CDG number 6, clean water and sanitation. Almost the entire population of Belarus is provided with basic sanitary and hygienic conditions. The efficiency of water use and the share of safely treated domestic and industrial wastewater is growing. CDG 8, decent work and economic growth. GDP per capita in terms of purchasing power parity has grown over the last 5 years by 17% and reached in 2020 $21,000 US. Belarus, which did not follow the path of complete lockdown, managed to ensure stable employment of the population, which made it possible to protect jobs and prevent wages from falling. Belarus also has a high index of economic readiness to support online commerce. 35th place among 152 countries. CDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. The Republic is able to maintain a high level of its industrial potential. The country has developed internationally recognizable Belarusian brands. In the global ranking of industrial competitiveness, Belarus holds 47th position out of 152 countries. The Belarusian IT industry is globally recognized. Information and telecommunication services account for 1/3 of exports of services. However, the existing potential has not been fully tapped. SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. Belarus continues the transition to new waste recycling technologies. Measures are taken to gradually reduce the use of plastic packaging and replace it with environmentally safe ones. Elements of circular economy are being actively introduced. SDG 13, climate action. In the context of implementation of this goal in compliance with international obligations under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, thereto, the Republic of Belarus has committed itself to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 28% by 2030 compared to 1990. CDG 15, life on land. Belarus is one of the top 10 forest states in Europe. An effective mechanism for the protection of biological and landscape diversity in the development of a system of specially protected natural areas. A national ecological network is being formed. Special attention is being paid to protection and use of peatlands. The area of land subject to various types of soil deterioration decreases annually. First of all, it applies to agricultural lands affected by radioactive contamination as a result of the Chernobyl catastrophe. For Belarus, this topic is still one of the most problematic. In conclusion, I would like to note that positive trends and relatively high ratings and indicators in achieving some goals absolutely do not mean that these goals cease to be in the focus of our government. We keep working not only on quantitative, but also on qualitative indices, and we do hope that Belarus will achieve CDGs on times, just as the previous agenda, a millennium agenda. Thank you for your attention. Irina, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm very happy that Belarus has such a high level of human capital. I'm very happy for you as partners for having such great achievements in human capital. So the next speaker, Anton Setoff, Deputy Director, Department of Multilateral Economic Cooperation and Special Projects of Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. So over to you, Anton, the floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, thank you for inviting me for organization. It's very nice to see my colleagues on the platforms of UN and support such initiatives. This week is full of events, and next week we're going to have some national segments, and we will see each other more and more at different events. First of all, I'd like to point out the topic of regional economic integration as a factor that mitigates negative effects, and we try to pay special attention to it. I'm not going to repeat that the measures that were taken on the level of our union and mentioned by the director and our moderator, the role the union and commission play and will continue playing for the sake of SDGs of our states to mitigate the effects that we all now feel. I'm not going to speak in detail on the progress in achieving SDGs in the Russian Federation. You can familiarize yourself with our statistical information recently published in our collection and other publications with the data on achieving particular SDGs, particularly innovation. And I will say a couple of words about our work, how we work with the integration agenda in Russia, and what we believe as one of the most relevant issues is coordination of our work and interaction with businesses. When we prepared national survey, we made a special stress that, in our opinion, that the tools available in the Russian Federation they take into account SDGs are aimed at their fulfillment. And when we presented our survey last summer, the Russian Federation accepted new national goals, and the process of adaptation took place, adaptation to these new tools. And it's a national project, and the unified plan to achieve these goals, and the work to analyze the plan for achievement of these SDGs. Besides speaking about the involvement of private sector, private businesses, there was a special order of the government at the end of last year, the first document of such level aimed at the implementation of the policy 2020-2030 with organization of work to involve a lot of funds, and Внешэконом Bank is the chief bank. It's kind of national architecture for sustainable investment system that will meet the strictest standards and compete with European and world analogical documents. Why we think that working with businesses is essential? Because we hear a lot from business about this importance, and large Russian companies want to have an active dialogue about SDGs, and of course, with us on the agenda, ecological topic is one of the priorities, and we understand that SDGs, they go far beyond the ecological agenda. A balance of three aspects of SDGs, ecological, economic, and social. It's a central principle of the agenda of 2030 that we must strive to achieve. To understand how to better interact, we created an expert council for sustainable development with 30 companies as participants and expert organizations and representatives of Russian businesses. We organized on February 2nd the second meeting, and many of our assumptions about the importance of this interaction was confirmed, and we had a lot of new. And of course, the SDGs and the agenda of 2030 is a road map, the route of business, the direction where it's going to. On the one hand, of course, it's a source for new barriers. Climate topic is one of the first and the new requirements regarding social responsibility. We are quite active in working with Organization for Economic Development, and all documents and principles prepared by this and developed by this organization, they play an active role in our country. And this negative motivation is also improved by new business niches appearing in the world market. There are several evaluations about the scope of this market from 13 to 16 trillion of dollars, and our own survey tells us that there are a lot of new niches, mobility, new buildings, technologies, and new access of population to IT services, the reduction of digital gaps, social tasks of the task, provided new economic opportunities for businesses, and liquidating the problems and gaps in healthcare and education. All that creates a lot of opportunities for private sector to reach the new markets. All this was confirmed after our dialogue with the business, and a number of Russian companies spoke about the importance of working with UN institutions and organizations. They were direct by saying that interaction with UN organizations gives them competitive advantage and is positive for their status and reputation. And of course, it's a possibility to find new opportunities for new economic activities. Therefore, we intend to continue this work, and we have a voluntary survey with 40 cases from Russian companies telling their stories of their assistance in terms of SDGs in the regions of their presence, and on the global level, it's also a large section of work. And I'm not going to expand on statistical monitoring because Irina Alexandrovna spoke about it very well. And I can only add that it's one of the key, one of the focuses in terms of state governance. And I think our colleagues from statistical agency are very good, and they have made a lot of progress over many indicators from the global list, from the UN list. It's a serious work. And although, of course, it should be added to, complemented by other forms of monitoring and assessment. And last year, together with the audit chamber of the Russian Federation, we worked together about the preparedness for SDGs. And of course, there are independent monitoring organizations from the civic society with the events. Well, yesterday, for instance, in the format of side event, an organization of civic society with participants from our country, and I participated. Let me finish by saying what is next. The pandemic of the COVID-19, what's happening? Well, it's of course created certain uncertainty in the global economy, and it affects our strength and but SDGs, they create kind of counterbalance. Well, and it's kind of plan that we're trying to stick for social economic development, and all the goals maintain their relevance, and we also saw the highlighted issues of socioeconomic aspects. The interest in this topic will continue growing, and of course it's very important. Let me finish with what I began, support from inside of the integration associations, first of all in EAEU, and cooperation with organizations of UN, and by receiving information from them, and I think it will help achieve certain results in our work to attain SDGs. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation about private sector regarding the realization of task. Of course, it's a priority of institutions. And when you refer to private business, it's very correct and timely. And I think your experience will help and should be used extensively. Thank you. It was very interesting. And next speaker is Natalie Mikhailova, Deputy Director for Research Work of Social Political Research of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Natalia Mikhailovna, the floor is...
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, I would like to welcome you all to this event, and would like to thank the organizers not only for the chance to speak, but also for the chance to hear different perspectives, to hear different approaches, how to analyze this situation that we're all discussing and been analyzing this last year. In fact, the pandemic of the coronavirus changed not only our social practices, not only our daily lives, but it also changed our scientific practices. And a lot of our scientific research is carried out in a different way, which is understandable. How Director General after WHO mentioned, the pandemic became a surprise even for the richest and most powerful countries that were not prepared. They were not able to properly allocate resources and deal with those emergencies. And unfortunately, we can see that because experts confirmed that today's crisis is radically different from the previous ones. It has impacted all the spheres, all the areas of economy. It impacted social situation in different countries, and also changed daily lives of people in a big way. And we as sociologists are interested in that. We have heard some presentations today that were about efforts of individual states in overcoming consequences of the pandemic. And also we heard about efforts of country associations, how they can construct, develop programs to support various economies. But as a rule, when we talk, we use those terms of economic well-being. We talk about sustainable development goals, but we are mostly interested in social well-being, psychological well-being, and to better understand how different countries in our unions were tackling the consequences of the coronavirus, how they were overcoming those difficulties and hardships that they had to face one-on-one in many cases, because help came later. So we launched this major study in different CIS countries to better see how different societies, how different social status were responding to that. And our selection included citizens of Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, and Armenia. Unfortunately, Belarus was not included for different reasons, mostly because mm, their electoral process was still ongoing, so they were involved with something else. But what is important here? These very serious, very strict restrictions that everybody had to implement, pretty much all the countries around the world had to implement them, with lockdown, self-isolation, transitioning to new models of work relations. They significantly raised the level of social sense. We see that social well-being was significantly down compared to previous years. So if we look at the differences uh, country by country, based on this study that we conducted during the pandemic, we can see that the highest satisfaction with life was demonstrated people living in Russia and Kazakhstan, and maximum insatisfaction was demonstrated by people of Armenia and Kyrgyzstan. They were mostly unsatisfied, but interpretation can be very simple here. It can be related to living standards, but it's not quite so. If we look at other indicators, we will see that there are other reasons are the foundation. But let me bring your attention to this. So social fears, which are of concern for our people compared to the period of pre-pandemic period, it hasn't really changed. Those fears are mostly economic in nature. Just in 2019 or in 2018, this group of leading fears that trouble our people. So it's high living costs, uh, higher prices for municipal services, food prices rising, and also uh, splitting society into rich and poor. So as surprising as it may seem, but this division and this range of issues still, they still continue to trouble our people. So people, on top of that, also had the fear of falling sick with the coronavirus. If you look at some correlations, so the lower the level of life as perceived by them. I'm not talking about objective economic indicators. I'm talking about perception. So the lower the respondents perceive their economic well-being, the lower the danger or the fear of coronavirus are. During this pandemic, people who have serious and social problems, so they're more concerned about other things, so, as maintaining their life standards that are used to or they can count on. So if we go back and look at some of the differences in how people evaluate the situations in different countries, we can see that lower life standards for a lot of population is of greater relevance for Armenia and Kyrgyzstan people, even though Russia is also quite close to them. So improving living conditions is of greater relevance for Armenian citizens. Growth of prices, this is something that Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, and Kazakhstan citizens are concerned about. But we are interested what specifically our citizens faced during the pandemic. What was the greatest cause of concern in 2020 at the peak of those developments? So we looked at the stats today that were presented by our colleague. She talked about lost jobs across pretty much all the economies, which was a major problem for. So for respondents, the threat of losing a job was a major threat, a major concern. 40% in Armenia, 38% in Kazakhstan, 29% in Moldova, and 34% of Russian citizens face that. And of course, another point of relevance was lost income, which is to be expected because labor market shrank, and also price increases for services and goods was a hot topic for all of the respondents. At the same time, our citizens, as colleagues said, uh, so they are used to living in these harsh conditions. So they demonstrate a high level of social resistance and social optimism compared to European countries, because we conducted a similar study, not only CIS countries, but also in European countries. I can tell you that for our citizens, for our countries, the existence of that panicky um, of that panicky moods is less characteristic compared to neighboring European countries. If we talk about realities, only 10% of our respondents really faced either infections with coronavirus or 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 maybe their close ones were infected with the coronavirus. So they were not as concerned about the pandemic. But if you look at the fears related to coronavirus itself, the fear of falling sick was felt strongly. I'm talking about strong fear. So the 19% of Kyrgyzstan, and then Moldova and Russia follow. And then we have Armenia, 15%, and Kazakhstan, 13%. So in Kazakhstan, we had the most optimistic perspective on that problem. But what causes concern? And I think it's related to socially negative consequences. It is fear of our people not to receive timely and qualitative and high quality medical services. And we understand that people don't have a lot of illusions about the state of our healthcare systems. People have adequate idea about what is really going on. And to the greatest extent, they're concerned about the poor condition of healthcare, and they were concerned about their inability of getting good medical services. Another paradox that we faced analyzing data of our research project is the fact that our citizens, to higher degree compared to Europeans, were concerned with the obligatory application of vaccination. So I think we conducted that back in August. So I think today's situation is different and more positive, but still they were very concerned that vaccination will be mandatory, especially in Kyrgyzstan. So they are the leaders in that. In other countries, that concern was around from 19 to 23%. So Kyrgyzstan was a leader in terms of that concern that vaccination will be obligatory. Another important point, unfortunately, I don't have the time because we have exceeded our limits. Another important point is how our citizens evaluate effectiveness of government actions to mitigate consequences of this coronavirus crisis. You know that measures were different, sets of measures were very specific depending on the country, but I can still highlight some general, most common measures that were adopted pretty much in all the countries, primarily measures to support healthcare systems and also those who are involved with providing medical services. Another support measure was related to supporting living standards and payment capacity of poor families, and then lending a grant funding for self-employed, etc. So these measures were mostly adopted by European countries and in North America. But with regard to our countries, the range of support measures looks somewhat different. In Kazakhstan, those were special insurance policies that help to provide aid to people who were not covered by obligatory insurance scheme, or the jobless benefits for self-employed, also free food and free social aid packages, and also business support measures. To a smaller degree, support measures were used in Kyrgyzstan, but in Armenian, there were around 14 programs of support that helped in one way or another for people to tackle the consequences of lockdown and pandemic. And even though we see this broad range of actions, our citizens evaluated government actions at a to a small degree. So pretty much they got 3 points out of 5 as people estimated them. What is the difference in those assessments? We see that in some cases, our citizens thought that adopted measures related to lockdown, or specifically Russian citizens, oftentimes violated mask regime. They thought that those measures were excessive, and lockdown measures could have been lighter or used in a different way. So to summarize that and come into conclusions, I should say that the society in all the countries not only poorly assessed the actions of their governments, but also poorly assessed the actions of international bodies. So we can talk about World Health Organization and its activities. We can talk about UN and World Labor Organization. So people were pessimistic. Mostly our respondents were mostly pessimistic about the actions of international bodies and their impact and their proposals with regard to overcoming this crisis situation. And considering the fact that societies articulated a demand for more effective government policies and for more effective actions from on the part of international bodies, So integrational associations should be also more active, but perhaps it makes sense to better advertise and promote those actions to make sure citizens are better informed what is being built, developed in the political sphere, what measures are offered, and what results can be achieved through those measures. Thank you very much. I'm concluding at this. I see that our moderator was distracted. Thank you very much. I finished my presentation. Thank you very much. Natalia Mikhailovna, that was a very good piece of work that you did on the coronavirus, and social resistance was something that was impressive. Our people are strong, and also our governments also help. So there's this synergy. So thanks or to them or in spite of them, it should be clarified further. Okay, thank you. Anyway, it was a great pleasure to hear what you said and to hear figures that you cited. So the next speaker is Sergei Ryazantsev, Director of the Institute of Demographic Research of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Over to you, Sergei.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues and Mr. Moderator. I have prepared a presentation about the results of our studies about the situation of migrant workers during the pandemic. This group that suffered the difficulties of this period without substantial assistance, unlike the citizens of Russia. We had several surveys. So here are some statistical figures. You see that in 2020, the number of migrant workers reduced by 2 times in Russia, as the major recipient of migrant workers in the CIS. Most of these workers come from Central Asia, and they play a significant role in terms of population formation and content in many Russian regions. You see the figures of different regions, how many workers are registered. In the context of our group, it should be said that the countries of the Eurasian Economic Union, the members of these countries, citizens have a maximum preferences. Well, of course, they need registration at the residence place within 5 working days and notification of Ministry of Internal Affairs by the employer within 3 working days. Speaking about Tajikistan citizens, they are supposed to obtain a patent, and the procedure is more difficult, and citizens of Turkmenistan have to obtain a working visa and permission or permit to work a QR code. Before the pandemic, in April 2020, about 3.2 million documented labor migrants from Central Asian countries could be in Russia. Well, the figures are not definite because we had several sources and none of them can be classified as very precise. We have three sources of information. The green line issued permits, red line, and there is no need to obtain patents and notifications by the employers. The figure is even less. And looking at the same category of people, we receive different figures from three sources. And we prepared a map with the share of migrant workers in the total of working populations with some regional specificity. Uzbekistan workers tend to go to Moscow, and as for eastern regions of Russia, there are more migrant workers from Kyrgyzstan and the Far East, and then workers from Kazakhstan prefer regions close to Kazakhstan border, and Tajikistan, as you see on the map, their share. They are dominating in the regions with successful development of local economies, Kaluga region, Moscow, and you see the prevalence in these regions, prevalence of Tajik migrant workers. According to Russian statistics, there are two categories, migrant labor in households and migrant labor for entrepreneurs. Most of them are employed in construction sector. I'm not going to speak on the measures of our government to restrict, and it then was reflected in the statistics and changed the employment situation. We had two sociological surveys in May last year and next in February this year. These were online polling with the help of representatives of national diasporas and non-governmental organizations using social networks. And we surveyed over 700 people during the first survey, and I am changing the slides quickly and want to point out that we did not attempt, despite the pandemic, 73% of those did not try to go home. Some of them did try, but the attempts were not always successful. Only a small percentage, 5%, left and came back. It means that the majority of migrant workers stayed in Russia during the pandemic. Many of them could not pay the rent, did not have money for food, and 45% could not find the job. Certain percentage had problems with the police. Now places of employment and how it changed the employment picture during the lockdown. 37% were sent on unpaid leave without preservation of their wages. 28% lost their jobs, particularly the construction sector, retail, restaurant, and catering, and some other trade sectors. The structure of income, April and February 2020 and 21. the income decreased in the beginning. 88% said about decrease of income. Then income increased 14%, but still a lot of spoke about the reduction of income. Then the average number of people in one apartment or house, and on average, the so-called migrant household or apartment, 3.8 people per flat, and in February 2021, and in April 2024 people. It was a large problem during the pandemic, and when one person reported COVID, and he could present danger to his neighbors living with him, and this was confirmed by world surveys. It was a key problem affecting the statistics, that hostels and other places like dormitories were the most problematic. As for people who had COVID and how it affected their families or their neighbors, well, according to self-assessment, 11% had or thought that they had COVID because they did not have a test, and about 37% said that some of their friends or close relatives or family members had COVID. Whether you are planning to be vaccinated to receive jab or not, 54% are ready to be vaccinated, and 46 are not ready. So it's about trust to healthcare system. A lot of almost half said that it has become more difficult to look for work, and we wanted to study this situation in detail. Here is our analysis of big data analysis. We analyzed 97 interviews in Moscow and Moscow region of job seekers, job applicants, candidates of Central Asian countries during period 2016-2020. We outlined a special group during the COVID situation, and about 50 indicators show the following picture: mastery of Russian language fluent, then expectations of wages level, men and women, particularly in the Moscow market, and migrant workers expect their salary of about 40,000 rubles, and women have a little higher expectations, and during the pandemic their expectations were lower, and the reduction of the level of wages during the pandemic was actually lower, and they most of them agreed to take these jobs. A lot of unemployment in retail sector and for women, and looking at men, a lot of people lost jobs in hotel sector, hospitality sector, and catering and construction. Another interesting situation by gender from 5 Central Asian republics. You see the difference between women from Kyrgyzstan that they were being very active in the labor market. It's not because they had no work, but because they had more potential, because they, as a rule, speak English fluently, and they are more active in looking for jobs. And we had a special study of job seekers from Kyrgyzstan by month, and maximum values of job seekers were at the beginning of the year, and then when Russian industries reopened, the figures reduced. And this slide, if you compare men and women, men from Kyrgyzstan were less active, and situation with citizens of Tajikistan is very similar, but there is a greater gap between men and women. It means that, first of all, the representation of Russian women, the presence of Tajik women in the Russian market is smaller, and they are less active in the labor market, and they stick to traditional employment. And men of Tajikistan demonstrated a lot of activity, and the same situation with Uzbekistan migrant workers, men and women. I could speak longer, but I will stick to schedule. And here are the recommendations to improve the situation of labor migrants in Russia. Political and economic measures, and Natalie Mikhailovna also spoke about assistance from international donors to support families of migrant workers who cannot receive money transfers, and food packages, free meals, and these resources have been mentioned by previous speakers. Representatives of diaspora national businesses came to the rescue of their compatriots, and the number of social measures to recognize migrant workers as unemployed. This measure was not adopted, but in Russia there was a certain material aid, but it was not from the state, from the Russian state, but it was provided by international organizations and by the embassies of these countries, medical measures, which are also important. I'm not going to expand on them, but they're very important. Of course, the health of population, citizens, and migrant workers is very important, and the illnesses of migrant workers may present danger to everyone, and control is necessary. And the step to introduce unified passports for movement within the territory of EAEU is a good step, and it's good to ensure comprehensive monitoring of health. I'm not going to read everything, but these proposals and measures have been developed, and They are published and can be sent. Thank you for listening, and I'm ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Sergey, thank you very much for your presentation, for your speech. A very detailed analysis indeed. I noticed in your figures that 70% didn't go back to their own countries during the pandemic. So that means that the Russian Federation was supposed to help in that difficult situation, which is, and also partner countries should welcome that. Thank you for your presentation. Are we going to have Sergey, who represents Russian Federation in UN? He'll be participating. He's always there, in fact, because I was told that he will provide some comments. So it's always nice to hear from you. Thank you. But in fact, we have only short comment. So we would like to thank the organizers of today's event, and consistently we support and participate the activities and events organized by the Eurasian Economic Commission. And also we participate activities of UN, European Commission for Economy. We think it's a good tradition to hold these events, and this discussion is a case in point. In spite of all the difficulties related to the pandemic of COVID-19, our integration association continues to contribute to the activities of UN, and we are thankful to all the esteemed presenters for their informative and very interesting presentations, and we are confident that experience of EAEU countries, the implementation of the 2030 agenda with regard to CDGs and in terms of overcoming pandemic has a lot of relevance in Europe and globally. We will take into consideration the points that you shared in our as well in our Geneva office of UN. We have questions, but we are running out of time, so we'll be very brief. First of all, we'll be thankful to the organizers for sharing the presentations that were made today, because we followed carefully those presentations, but some points, especially lists of recommendations like on the last slide, this is something we would like to have. So if there's a possibility, please share them with us. And we have this question. So circular economy, as it is called, it was also mentioned. That comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Belarus. So circular economy is the key topic of a 69th session of UN European Committee. So we'd be very much interested, and we would like to hear from you in what way EAEU as an integration association and its member countries, how they could contribute to the development of this topic. So what we can offer and what we can share with our colleagues, what could be of help and of interest. And I would like to thank the organizers once again for conducting today's very helpful event. Hopefully next year we will continue this tradition. Thank you. Thank you for that, Sergey Yurievich. So was that a question for us? So what was it? About circular economy. Very, very good. Uh, mm, mm, That was kind of a question. So I can tell you about circular economy briefly. It was stated by myself and by others. So this is an important area of strategic development, and green economy is also part of it. So there's this section related to circular economy. So we are developing a plan, which is a major plan. So in 3 years, we will coordinate those measures as part of that plan. And some measures are being planned in relation to that, and it will be posted on our website. So once they're formulated. Thank you very much, colleagues. Now I would like to move to Q&A. We received some questions. So the question for Gora Shudovna, but she left. So there was a girl there, her colleague, so perhaps she'll be able to answer. So the question sounds like this. So UN documents say that civil society organizations play an important role in achieving CDGs. So how do you plan to involve civil society organizations, specifically NGOs, in monitoring those indicators in EAEU countries? So can you respond to that? It'd be nice, but introduce us.
Thank you for the question. On the behalf of the Department for Integration Development, I will try to answer to your question. Well, first of all, our work in the Commission is mainly based on the active cooperation with expert community, with the business, and of course, the civil society. The Commission has lots of tools for building productive dialogue with other parties, and in this regard, we have no issues, no problems. However, as a supranational body, the Commission mainly interacts with government agencies and the business. As for the civil society's involvement in the monitoring of the SDGs, in this regard, our priority is to increase the Eurasian businesses' SDG orientation. In this regard, we aim that the business in turn in itself will promote and protect its SDG interests while planning their project activities within the Eurasian Economic Union. In this context, we mainly rely on the fact that the civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations have already established interaction and dialogue with the business. And since the Commission, first of all, has an economic agenda, we are more focusing on the business positions, and we're interested to ensure that business takes into account the sustainable development agenda, listens to the representatives of the civil society. Of course, in general, we are open for interaction and we are ready to listen to the interested and SDG-oriented businesses within the framework of a discussion about projects on supranational regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you understood the essence. Question to Irina Zbarska. How does your committee differentiates national and supranational levels of achievement of SDGs, and where you have stats and where stats are lacking? Thank you for the question. It is a very good question indeed on methodology and how it should be developed, but situations differ. We have indicators that had been developed back in the Soviet system of statistics, and our countries have well preserved those approaches that were developed over decades, like infant or maternity, mortality. So in all the countries, we still have some variety of, we don't see much variation between the countries. Also longevity, life expectancy, we have some probabilistic models which are used, and variance is also lacking there. But such indicators as share of people living below the poverty line, I emphasize that as nationally defined, because in every country methodology is different. They have their own poverty lines, and we cannot compare countries to each other. And we even avoid building those diagrams. We provide only tables. So even for that presentation, we cited, data with lots of references for each of the country. So in our publications, we have those indicators that have national particularities, and we always indicate that. So in that situation, situation can be different for different indicators. If you follow our publications, you will always see those national particularities that were used in calculation of a specific indication. If you have that note, then methodology is general. So, and also for which statistical data is least available. So on slide 2 in my presentation, when I provide dynamics on indicators, that we use in our monitoring activities. So the number of global indicators, the number of additional indicators. So you can have a more detailed look at that, and I can tell you off the top of my head that such indicators, such goal as climate action or water, life and water. So information on those is not collected by statistical agencies, but there are relevant bodies that work with them. So statistical bodies are not really involved, or like life and water. So in CIS countries, not all the countries have access to seas. So its relevance is different for different countries. And in the beginning of my presentation, I stated that we selected those indicators for which most of the countries can report, can provide information on. Such indicators, as I cited, they're not well represented in our statistical publications, but also would like to say that voluntary national reports, which are prepared not only by stat agencies, but involving all relevant agencies, so that information can be presented. And in conclusion, I wanted to note that all of our national statistical services try to provide full information, which is important, especially during the COVID crisis that we're still living through, to make sure that information is fully accessible, because there is a great demand for it on the part of international organizations, national bodies. So sometimes they contact us to get it. So that requires a lot of work. So statistical agencies do a lot of work. Thank you. Personally, I have this question. Maybe that's not for you, Irina, but I have this question on Miro statistics. Okay, Miro statistics. When we analyze foreign trade, exports and export and import, we see that those are different figures, because we already talked about that. And so we have different numbers for, so foreign trade, it's part of our department. It's covered by our department. We have the head of that unit. So maybe Tatiana can say a few words on that. Hello. Please take off your mask. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because we'd like to see your face. It's very nice. Very nice. So this is the head of our department. that covers international trade. She has been vaccinated. So if you, how come you're wearing masks if you have been vaccinated? So that issue was raised a long time ago. Unfortunately, we don't have any coordination on this to resolve this issue. It's very good that you raised it again. It seems to me it's impossible to discuss or resolve it here, but this is something to be discussed in the future. Perhaps we can deal with it not online right now, but when we have a separate dedicated meeting on this, because it's not fitting with this topic. Is that it? So can I add something to it? In fact, we had some attempts, frankly speaking, just attempts to work with the statistical department on this issue. Unfortunately, we're not able to achieve understanding, mutual understanding. We're open to cooperate on this. Speaking of mirroring in stats, we use that approach to assess migration. Back in those days, we wanted to calculate it because there are different national laws how migrants are calculated. So we recalculated from 1991. So once the Commonwealth of Independent States was formed, it celebrates 30 years, by the way, this year. So we calculated migration volumes. So those who left and those who arrived. So for decades, we had stable, positive balance of migration with Belarus, between Russia and Belarus, Russia and Ukraine, Azerbaijan and Ukraine. So we had some stable pairs of countries, but statistically, we had that difference in migration figures. So mirroring those figures, we're able to clarify actual numbers. So at least internally, we're able to recalculate it because sometimes these people were counted twice. Something like 4.5 million were added. So the permanent residents were counted towards wrongly, but we can discuss those issues, of course, separately. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will pass it on to our department because I have very close contacts with them. So to make sure our databases and our numbers are aligned. So we are in constant touch with them. Thank you. A question from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Belarus. In the rankings of our Commission on inclusiveness and sustainable growth, Belarus is #1 among our EAEU countries. So what practical experience Belarus can share with other countries of this union? Thank you very much for your question. It's a very specific question because we are being Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're dealing with political issues, not with economic issues. Economists should respond to this. Perhaps we can ask for more detailed information, then we can pass it on to the Secretariat of the EAEU. But meetings like today's are very helpful because we are practically approached the preparation and conducting last April of an event at the level of heads of the governments on achievement of SDGs in EAEU countries. And we wanted to involve both politicians and business figures. We had a very interesting program planned, and Belarus was chairing EAEU at the time. So that was our initiative. Unfortunately, did not transpire, but there is a possibility still there, and that idea should still be considered going forward, and also to better develop those more specific issues, and we would be able to invite other stakeholders. Of course, I did not answer that question. I understand that, but because of my competencies, I realized that economists should reply to that. But their platforms, their places where we can get together to discuss it separately. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. A question to Anton. You emphasize that to develop targeted measures to implement SDGs, an expert council on sustainable development was created that included also businesses in the Russian Federation. So what were practical proposals from businesses? What support measures what support measures were mostly appreciated by businesses? I will try to be brief answering this question. First of all, it seems to me, and what is important when business talks to us on these issues, and generally what we see in our markets, there are many incentives for businesses to use sustainable development models, and it comes not from the governments, but in investor requirements. It's a requirement of lenders, of suppliers, of suppliers, of clients, of customers of those companies. And for that reason, businesses oftentimes start to implement CDGs even before a government asks or proposes that to them, or even before any tools are offered. And the role of the government, as we can see from our interaction with businesses, becomes important when they need some help to strengthen those processes, when companies need to provide reports or report on their operational activities, financial or non-financial activities related to that. So they need to have standards. There are multiple standards. Even in a specific industry, there are multiple international standards that could be used, and the government can help them to adapt to those standards and comply with those standards. And with regard to financial reporting, and also creating an infrastructure for green sustainable funding. So basically this document that deals with what activities can be considered green and sustainable, and so you can ask for a better green, more preferential loans. So which is quite important. All things related to standardization, because yesterday at a platform of our ministry, we had the first meeting of on sustainable industrial development. It was a high-level event. This is a high-level event. We talk about high-level issues, but we talked about technical regulation, how standards can be aligned, standards in different countries, including Russia, to meet these new requirements for sustainable development. So that was a very specific discussion. So that demonstrates that we have greater demand for that, and it's very specific for businesses because technical regulations is a separate important topic. So it's great that the Russian Ministry of Trade and Industry will be working on that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Anton. A question for Natalia, a technical question. Where we can find data of that research that you mentioned? So where you can you find it on the? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. It's very nice to hear that. But we have not published it yet because we were preparing a separate book, a monography on this. But if you contact us, we will share that data with you. So it's tables. Great. But you had some very good information. So very multifaceted. Thank you very much. Of course, God. Institute for Socio-Political Research of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Thank you very much. I need to summarize today's meeting now. Of course, those issues of global importance are very serious, mostly related to the impact on the economy, on the people, on migration. Of course, our worldview was transformed, our behavior was transformed, our decision-making changed on the whole. As was mentioned, Agora, we defined these strategic areas for ourselves, and now we keep elaborating specific targets in education and science, etc. And we will keep advancing. We'll keep working as a commission. But on the whole, speaking of each one of the presenters, I took some notes, some of the key points. Irina Zbarska. So the problem of data, it has existed for a long time and needs to be resolved. And in the commission, we face that problem as well with data. So uploading data, so PDF files, it is really problematic, not only for ourselves, but also for external users. So I always stated we should use Eurostat because they have a great database and you can get data from there without any problems, you know, regardless of the format. Another one, Anton, what I really like what he said when he mentioned that we need to have an action plan on CDG implementation. I do think that this should be done because CDG action plan covers all the areas of our life. It is to be implemented in our countries. And it will be helpful not only for the economies, but also for the well-being of our people. And I also enjoyed, at this point, social resilience of our people. So you said in very harsh conditions, like, so when you said, so Natalia, when you talked about that, so with such people, you can do a lot and we can live through many things if we are able to fine-tune it to the right. So we will become leaders and we'll be able to compete with European Union. So thank you all very much, colleagues. It was a very good event. It would be very nice to see you all face to face, in person, to share opinions, to have a detailed discussion on all these issues. Hopefully next year, we'll have a chance to see each other in Geneva, face to face, with UN representatives, and we will have, you know, live interaction, not using these screens. Thank you all very much for your participation. And see you all later. Thank you.